Shalom. I am Brother Isaiah, also known as Mr. Blaktastic or Yeshaya. Welcome, beloved. I'm a born again Messianic Israelite. Get the echo out the background. I'm a born again Messianic Israelite follower of Adonai Yeshua HaMashiach, also known as the Lord Jesus Christ. I believe Almighty Yahweh is awakening a remnant of scattered Israel as dry bones in a valley to their identity as natural descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as part of the promised seed of faith. I believe this awakening is to bring together Israelite and Gentile believers as one in Christ to fulfill Scripture before the imminent return of Christ to reign on earth and before the final judgment. It is my sincere prayer that through the ministry of the Scripture by the Holy Spirit, I may serve my generation as a prophetic voice to awaken Israel and all in need of salvation through the gospel of Yeshua Mashiach. On this platform, I will be teaching or discussing Scripture, history, and other relevant issues. I pray you receive insight, inspiration, and faith by the word in the name of Adonai, Yeshua. So, shalom to everyone. And this is just a late live here, where basically I just wanted to go live because I had said that I would try to go live this weekend just to answer any questions that the audience may have. I should have broadcast this or advertised this earlier, but other things did get in the way. So I'm just trying to do it now as we close out this wonderful weekend. For anyone who is interested, I don't know who's going to show up, how many people we may have, but we'll do what we can with whatever time we have. If not, we'll just scrap it and we'll try again another time. But blessings to my brother Jason Camphor. Good to see you in the chat, my brother. Blessings to you, Sister Too Blessed for Defeat. Good to see you also. All right. So, like I said, this is just basically a question and answer session, just a quick little Blaktastic chat, as I like to call these, where we'll just be answering any questions that you all may have. We may also show a couple of video presentations that I think some of you all may find interesting. One thing that I did find interesting in particular was this video that I've had for some time, and the video covers the history behind racism in medicine, all right, in terms of how it's distributed, who it's distributed to, and those types of things. And it may give some of you all some insight. Now, by no means do I want to make anybody paranoid about medicine at all, but it might be a good little thing for some of us to probably see who haven't probably ever seen.
Marion Sims.
Hold on, it got started right away. You got started right away. Now, can you all should be able to see that on the screen. Could you hear that when she started talking? Was that easy for you all to hear? So if you can hear that, for the few people that are there with me, just go ahead and give me a quick one, and we're going to go ahead and start the video. All right. And this is a very short presentation. All right, so y'all can hear pretty good. All right, I'm going to go ahead and run it. It's only about three minutes or so, but I think you might find this pretty interesting.
Meet the father of modern gynecology, Dr. J. Marion Sims. He's been dubbed the savior of women and the architect of the vagina for developing revolutionary gynecological procedures and tools like the dreaded speculum. Statues of the 19th century surgeon currently stand in 3 American cities, including this one right here in New York City. But it turns out your routine pap smear has a dark history. Dr. Sims conducted much of his research on slaves, like Anarcha, a teenager who was one of many voiceless, faceless black women who suffered through his experiments without anesthesia or informed consent. For 4 years, Sims operated on young slaves repeatedly to find a cure for a condition caused by complicated childbirth that left many women incontinent or unable to control their urination. Anarcha endured 30 practice procedures before Sims finally got it right. According to historian and medical ethicist Harriet Washington, Sims knew the operation was extremely painful, but wrote that using anesthesia was not worth the trouble or risk. In fact, the pain was so excruciating that the woman had to be restrained by 2 male surgeons just to make it through. And that's why many people are now calling for his statues to come down. But Dr. Sims isn't the only physician to use black people as unwitting test subjects. It's only one chapter in a long history of racist medical abuse. In the infamous Tuskegee experiment, federal researchers observed 399 black men with syphilis from 1932 to 1972. A cure was discovered 13 years in, but doctors withheld treatment for decades just so they could continue their work. And that's not even the most egregious example. For decades leading up to the 1970s, white doctors in training performed secret surgical sterilizations, including unnecessary uterus removals on black and Puerto Rican women. In the early 90s, the New York State Psychiatric Institute conducted a study into the genetic roots of violence. The researchers recruited mostly low-income black boys and injected them with a drug known to be poisonous. The boys' mothers were given a whopping $125 for having their sons participate. And to this day, we still don't know the long-term effects this experiment has had on those kids. These stories are horrifying, but racism in the medical field isn't a thing of the past. A 2016 study found that a quarter of medical residents who were surveyed thought black skin is actually thicker than white skin. And many of those same residents also thought black patients felt less pain than their white counterparts and recommended less accurate pain treatment. So it's not surprising that studies have found that black patients tend to trust doctors less. And all of this has real consequences on people's health. In East Harlem, where Dr. Sims' statue stands, 80% of the residents are black or Hispanic, and the average life expectancy here is almost 10 years lower than that of majority white neighborhoods in Manhattan. So maybe it's time we stop celebrating this racist history and start recognizing the centuries of abuse people of color have endured in the name of science.
Pretty interesting stuff. Hey, shalom there, Sister Naomi. And I saw my brother Yasun. Shalom to y'all. So what do you all think about that? You all hear some of this history behind some of the medical advancements and how black people were used as experiments in this country for things like this. And it's pretty interesting just how deep the rabbit hole can go. Blessings to you, Sister Trini. Good to see you, Mora. Pretty deep how interesting the rabbit hole could go. And so just like I said, there's a few things I wanted to kind of show us here, because I know the majority of my audience is, even though it's not exclusively black people, the majority of my audience is. And so there's a few things I wanted to just kind of bring up, just kind of kick off some discussion. But I also want to show some other things too, because as we are coming into the close of 2022, there's also some other things that we probably should be aware about that we probably haven't taken a lot of notice of. And I know a lot of us, with so many different ideas and things of this sort that are going around in our community, so many different opinions about what's going to happen, so many people focused in on eschatology and other things of this sort. What if some of the things that we believe don't happen exactly when we expect them to happen or the way that we want them to happen? What do we do until then? And the question brings it back to whether or not, we're going to continue to walk by faith. We see all these different types of things that have happened. And I know a lot of people are preparing for different things that we're basing on what we believe prophetically. But what about some practical things that we can do as a people to put ourselves in a better position for things that may happen, before even the end of this year. This is an election year. There's going to be a change in our government, probably a very dramatic change, in which the balance of power is going to shift again. And we are in largely a two-party system, even though there are other parties that are available. There's primarily only two parties that people tend to go with, and that's either Democratic or Republican. And some of our people believe that voting is useless and other things of this sort. But with all these various beliefs and different things that we have out there, none of it has stopped the things that we see happening. So we have some decisions that we have to make in terms of whether or not we're going to get involved with the process to try and change some things for the time in which we currently occupy on this earth, or whether or not we're going to continue to stand back and be aloof. And so there's a lot of questions that we have to ask ourselves. And we see things like this when it comes to our medicine, our healthcare, and other things like that. And we know we have different people in our community, such as Sister Sheila, who is teaching us and trying to bring to us information about our health and well-being. What if there comes a time when the medical profession as we know it has been turned upside down? If you've paid attention in the last several years, I say over the last 2 decades in particular, since the beginning of this current millennium, we've seen a lot of the holistic health professionals all of a sudden come up either missing or dead. And it seems like when people begin to subscribe or prescribe rather, and suggest natural remedies and cures, which the Most High himself has put in the earth, and they begin to bring that information to the general public or populace, that a lot of times those people end up going missing. Probably the most famous of those individuals that recently met their demise under mysterious circumstances was the well-known Dr. Sebi. And whether you agree with his research or not, or whether you know whether or not he was an actual doctor, medical doctor, he did have some success with many of the things that he suggested to people. And it all had to do with holistic health, changing our diet and the way that we do things. And I've noticed that the dietary stuff has a great impact also on our mental health, not only in our physical bodies, but also on our mental health in terms of how we're able to function. And so there's some things that we're going to have to start doing or thinking about differently than we have before, because there may come a time when things shift so much in the world that we currently live in that we are going to have to go back to doing things in a very what seemed to be antiquated way. A lot of us come from families or legacies where our grandparents and great grandparents and such, and maybe even for some as recent as your parents, but for the most of us, it's a few generations back where they didn't have health insurance. They couldn't afford to go to the doctor. And you normally went to somebody in the community who had a knowledge or some type of history of dealing with home remedies and things of this sort, which medical science has now found out these things were a lot more effective than we believe. But bless you, Naja's Truth, and this Sister Stephanie M. Good to see you. Sis, I missed you. I'm glad to see you. And so it's going to behoove us to start educating ourselves probably on how to get the health treatment that we need through the food that we eat, and not simply by going to the doctor. I'm a veteran, so I have access to, the government healthcare system through the VA. But a lot of veterans go to the VA and don't necessarily get good care. And it's not always what it's cracked up to be, even though I do believe that most people in the medical profession have good intentions. And I think that you do have to have a certain amount of human compassion. Let's look at the history of the medical profession, especially in the Western Hemisphere, and look at how they use Black people as guinea pigs. It's created a lot of mistrust between the Black community and the medical profession. And so what do we do about that? What do we do about that? But then also on top of that, how are we preparing ourselves for other things? I got another video clip that's about 6 minutes long. And What do you say, Sister Sonia? Bless you, beloved. Good to see you. Sister Sonia said, because it's teaching facility. Mm, mm. Yeah, and Sister Naja agrees. So that's that's true. Yeah, veteran. She's also a veteran. Yeah, and so we know that many times. I remember when I was serving actively, it seemed like the miracle cure for everything that was wrong with you was Motrin. You got a migraine, go get Motrin. You get cut, give you Motrin. You twist your ankle, they give you Motrin. It was a cookie cutter way in dealing with everything. And then when I got out of the military, and I would take whatever the military had prescribed me, and I started revealing that to my private doctors. And this is why I say I think most people in the medical profession have the best of intention, but not everyone necessarily cares. Some people got into the profession just because it's a great job to have because it pays well. But when I started taking some of the medicines and other things to those doctors, I had one doctor, a white gentleman, who's now retired and may even be passed on, because it's been a long time since I've had any contact with him, especially since I've left Southern California and now been in Georgia for about the last 10 years. I remember when I took him the list of medications that the military prescribed me, and the man got very upset when he saw what I had. And he said out loud, to the point where I think he even surprised himself, and he said, "This doesn't work on Black people." And the medications that they had given me, he was one of the leading, actually, I found out later, one of the leading researchers in certain areas. And he had made it part of his mission to treat people who he felt were being underserved, i.e., Black people. And he explained to me that, even though we're all human beings and things of this sort, it's just a scientific fact, and it's proven that certain types of treatment or medication don't work the same on everybody. And there's a lot of different factors that go into that. But yet and still, it seemed like, just like how they use lab rats and mice, that a lot of times in the medical profession, they would use Black people for these particular experiments. And I was surprised at how much information this particular doctor was giving me. And so he changed all my medications, which in turn had a dramatic change also in my health. And he was probably one of the first people to start telling me to take supplements and other things, and even talked about diet. Most doctors that I have encountered don't talk to you about diet. They don't talk to you about holistic health. They don't even offer it as an alternative. They just find more ways to medicate you. And I thought that was also interesting. What you say, Sister Peggy she says that her grandmother didn't want to go to the hospital, says she died sitting in a chair at home. And yet there's a genuine fear. And as we just saw in that video, this history, again, how they said that, the lady said that they believe Black people had tougher skin than other people. And so when you hear those kind of things, that means that we can take more pain. So they felt like we were better suited for some of this painful and inhumane experimentation. Brother Jason says that when he was in the Army, that was the main medication they would prescribe for most aches and pains. That was one of the reasons why I rarely went. Yeah, man, sick call became like a joke. And Sister Sonia even backs up what I just said. She says there, different people are predisposed to different illnesses and disease processes. And, and that was, like I said, this cookie cutter approach to treating everybody the same. You just can't do it. And so when we see these kind of things happening in our world, we're going to have to start taking our health, our education, and other things like that into our own hands and do our own research. Nothing wrong with you questioning medical professionals. I don't advise, if you got a good doctor or medical team that you feel you can trust, I don't advise deciding to do things on your own, but I would say take their advice and do your research on the advice to make sure you're getting the right kind of advice. And if you don't trust it or you think something's wrong, then you can go get a second opinion. All right. Hey, shalom there, Sister Yvette. Good to see you, beloved. all right, you can go and get a different opinion. But just know that there's a price that has been paid by a lot of our ancestors and people in these various experiments and other things. I'm going to show another video clip here. And what you say, Sister Trini? Let me see what she said real quick. She said her dad was a veteran, was probed and cut on most of his military career until he died in 2021. Sorry to hear that. And we're praying for you for the loss of your father. That's very recent. Said most likely some of the medicine worsened his condition to stomach cancer. Now, that right there is a good point, because one of the medications that my doctor took me off of, he said that the side effect was actually worse than the cure itself. And it wasn't actually even a cure. If you notice, they haven't really cured a disease probably since the discovery of penicillin, which helped to cure certain things, I think like polio or something of that sort. They haven't really provided a cure. Medication normally helps you live with whatever the ailment is. And in some cases, taking that medication for a prolonged period of time may actually harm you over a long period of time. Now, does that mean that every last one of these medications does that? I can't say, but I think that there is a serious risk at becoming so dependent on a particular medication that we feel like we can never get off of it. And I'm just one of those people who believe that the Most High put enough things in this earth to speak to our health to where we don't have to be dependent on medicine. But again, as the scriptures say, be it unto you according to your faith. Take wise medical advice and make wise decisions, and make no decision without first praying to hear from the Most High. But don't get it in your own mind that certain things, may be harmful when they're not, but also don't assume that everything is helpful until you researched it and checked it out for yourself, and then get yourself a second opinion if necessary, and perhaps even a third. And so that's something, that's very important. And shalom to you, Brother Kedrick. Good to see you, my man. I haven't been to a chiropractor yet, brother, but I think I probably need to do that because I feel like I need to get an adjustment. But that's an interesting comment that you made there about chiropractors giving information on supplements to any doctors. I can't verify that yet, but I guess I have to check with one and find out. But this is some interesting stuff. Now, there's other things also facing us. Dr. Claude Anderson, who I look up to, he's in his 80s now. But he had been forecasting for a long time what the economic, political, and social status of Black people would be going forward at this point in our existence in the Western Hemisphere, especially if you're in the United States of America. And we're even seeing come to fruition things that he predicted about 50 years ago coming to pass. We've already seen the Hispanic community bypass the Black community as now the largest minority. We were number 2 for a long time, for most of the existence of this country, behind the white majority. But now we've been moved down to number 3 in terms of the list of people groups in this country. And I'm talking about the Black community in terms of those who are considered African American or American descendants of slaves or descendants of slaves in some way. So we have a issue that's going on amongst us as well. And all these elections and different things have been going on and playing a part. And we got more Black politicians than we've ever had, but our situation has not changed. It's only gotten worse. Why is that? These are questions that we need to be asking. And this is why I do advocate for getting involved in the political process. Even if you don't feel like you can change anything at the polls, you need to be finding out what's going on in your community, what's going on down at the local city hall, what's going down on these school boards and various city councils and things, because it has a direct impact on where you live right now. And then another issue that Sister Sonia just brought up, abortion. The abortion issue is a topic that some feel is taboo in the Black community, but we've aborted more babies, perhaps on per capita in terms of our volume and percentage, than any other people group. We've aborted far more babies than Black on Black crime has seen murdered. And yet we fail to include that as murder. And we see now that this big push, especially by the Democratic Party, all about abortion rights, and they masking it as women's health and all of these different things. Yet that's the number one killer of Black people in this country is abortion. It's been promoted to us in all types of ways. Most of your Planned Parenthoods, which facilitate the greater number of abortions, are in Black communities. Even when Margaret Sanger, who was the founder of Planned Parenthood and a leading eugenist, when she started this whole program, one of the groups that she targeted or used to entice people, Black women in particular, into undergoing abortions were Black ministers. So the people that are supposed to stand for life and lead other people to eternal life became some of the biggest voices and advocates for Black people to get abortions. So even now, as I'm in Georgia and we got this Senate race going on between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker, two Black men, neither one of them are the best candidates. A lot of people went along with Warnock because he's a preacher and he is the pastor of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's ministry down at Ebenezer here in Atlanta. But he's a political pundit. You can't trust a preacher that's more political than he is more about the gospel. And there's all kinds of issues going on here. We got Stacey Abrams currently running also again for governor. And a lot of people just gonna vote for her because she's Black and say, well, she's better than Kemp. That may not necessarily be true, because you got to look at the agenda overall. A lot of times we're duped more easily by our own people into believing they're the better choice because they're the Black choice. But the Black choice ain't always the better choice. Sometimes you're stuck between two bad choices and you got to pick the best of two bad choices. But one choice may be so much worse that you don't see it because that choice looks just like you and you feel more comfortable making that choice. So we got to raise, our awareness and our discernment. I'm going to show this other clip here that I think is pretty important. Dr. Claudia Anderson is going to talk about 5 different ways that Black people are being taken out. And this is a pretty eye-opening clip, to say the least. And I want you to listen in closely. I'm just trying to get it loaded up here. I think you're going to find this pretty interesting, because I know I did. All right, let me get it out the right folder. I'm in the wrong folder. So let me go to my research folder and pull that up. Let's see if we can get that loaded up here.
Across America is that you got a process in place right now in urban redevelopment. They're using 5 techniques that totally wipe you out. One is called gentrification. They're going into all these major cities that used to be majority Black populated cities, and they are erasing you. In places like Detroit, Michigan, New York, Boston, Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. used to be the chocolate city. When I went there with President Carter in 1976, at that time, Washington, D.C. was 78% Black. Now it's down to about 42% Black. Chocolate City is gone. Detroit, Michigan is going to be totally wiped out by immigrants pouring into the society. Since 1970 up to now, we've had 45 million immigrants coming to the United States. They came in over you, and they're displacing you. And then the second term they use besides gentrification to wipe you out is a thing they call privatization. You go into Detroit, Michigan, as they gentrify, they're going to take all the public resources and things that should be owned by the public, they're going to place them through privatization to the hands of the wealthy whites. Whites are going to buy your golf courses, your subway systems, your bridges, your tunnels. They're going to control your airports, your parks, your museums. Why? Again, because Anderson says, he who owns and controls the resources got the power. If you own and control nothing, you are totally, absolutely useless and expendable. And so, and that's why nothing has changed for us, because we don't understand the system of gentrification and privatization. The other thing they're using to wipe you out in those cities is called metropolitan forms of government. Where now they're going to do regional form of government, which means that the whites in the suburbs can come into those black cities and set up some kind of consortium to control what goes on inside those cities so they can extract the resources out of them. Another concept they use in those cities is called cool cities, which says cool cities means bring in the gays and let them replace black folk. And so, that's the fourth scheme they use on you. And in Detroit, Michigan, using that as an example again, the governor there has already set up in movement a system where he wants to go to the President of the United States, Obama, and ask him for a green card system where he can start importing Chinese from China to make Detroit, Michigan the biggest Chinatown in the United States. Even though that city had a 90% black population, they're going to bury blacks in Detroit, Michigan, underneath Asians coming into Detroit. And already in Detroit, Michigan, in Dearborn, right on the outskirts of Detroit, Arabs own 90%. 90% of all the businesses in the city of Detroit are owned by Arabs. Arabs and 90% black population must go to the Arabs to get what they want in terms of food, medicine, clothing. Because they own they own out of the gas stations. You got 146 gas stations in Detroit, Michigan. Arabs now own 144 in a black city. Blacks own 2 gas stations out of 146. You own nothing. The rest, the hotels are owned, and the 7-Elevens are owned by Indians. Asians are owning the laundries. The laundries, they're owning the hair and wig shops, the nail shops. Blacks own nothing in a 90% black city. And that's why now Detroit went into poverty. That's why it was declared bankrupt, because blacks had money. Blacks had about 11 to $12 billion a year annual disposable amount of money passing through their hands. They were going out to the suburbs, spending it in the suburbs, and spending it with the Arabs and the Asians, the Hispanics, and everybody else. And when I tried to put in a plan there for black folk, they said it was racist for me to try to help black folk. They said, yes, Dr. Anderson, we admit in this town that we have an Asian town, a Chinatown, a Pole town, a hockey town, a Cork town, a Mexican town, and a Greek town, but it's racist for you to try to do something for black folk, to build a black town. And guess what the black leadership said? They sure is right. And if you want to find out if I'm telling a lie or not, you got blacks sitting right in this auditorium that was there. You got right here on the front row, 2 here, you got Rosie Milligan that was there and spoke in Detroit. And I had over 1,000 blacks come across America and say, we will move and relocate our business to Detroit to build a black community, a black business district. We'll move our businesses into Detroit, over 1,000 of them. And guess what? The town got scared and fighting. And they told black folks, no, we don't. It's racist for Anderson to come in and not include everybody and everything. And so that ended that effort. And so that's why Detroit failed. So what I'm saying to you is anything that's happened to black folk in this country is continuing to happen, but it is not by accident. You all have to understand today that you're locked into a social construct. That social construct was put in place almost 300 and 400 years ago. You're locked and boxed. You're locked and boxed. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you that nobody else tells you. You're locked and boxed because of the United States Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence. You're locked and boxed. We got black leaders who can't figure that out. You go read the Constitution, it tells you straight up front what's going to happen to black folk. You're locked into it. That is a social construct that says in this country, that in the Constitution, which was approved in 1789, it says that this is a white nation. The first immigration law in 1791, spell it out. It is a white nation for white Europeans and other white people classified as white. And black folk are now going to be a permanent underclass. Not a permanent class, then will be an underclass. You would be classified as 3/5 of a human being. You will be classified as property. You would be classified as property and 3/5 of a human being. You would not be permitted to do things that everybody else could be permitted to do. And in the Constitution, it's spelled out, and black folk don't know this. The people in New York, in Philadelphia, met for a whole week. They closed all the windows and all.
All right, so that's the end of that one. But you heard part of what he said. You heard part of what he said. Now, the thing about it is these video clips that I'm showing you all are not new by any means. They've been around for quite some time. The thing that I think that's amazed me is how little that they've been paid attention to by our community. How little they've been paid attention to by our community. And so we have had voices that have been telling us these things for quite some time. But there's been very little from our community that seems to have paid attention to it. And now we're at the verge or the precipice of all of these things that we've been aware of seemingly coming to pass now in our particular day and time. And this stuff has been going on for quite some time. Matter of fact, I got some other interesting videos here that I want to share with you all as well. And this is just little show and tell, little conversation that Sister Naomi brought up, Deuteronomy Chapter 28 and 43. And matter of fact, let me see if we can pull that scripture up just to see exactly what it says. But it says, the sojourner who is among you shall rise higher. And it's a pretty interesting verse. Let me see if I can put it on the screen for us, so we can take a look at it. All right. And here's what it says. It says, the sojourner who is among you shall rise higher and higher above you, and you shall come down lower and lower. Now, some people would say, well, we're not in our land, so technically we're sojourners as well. And so it's meaning that the people that are in the land with you are going to do better than you where you're at. But that's not necessarily, I wouldn't define that necessarily as strict. In a land of immigrants, where we're all sojourners or strangers, as the KJV says, we're all foreigners. And so what we're seeing is reminiscent of this very scripture, where other foreigners amongst us, because there's only two non-immigrant groups of people in this country. And that is those who are considered the Native Americans or the Indians, who are already here, spread out in the country in their various tribes and nations. And then also those who are slave descendants, who were brought here against their will. So black people, for the most part, because there are some of us who are descendants of those who were freeborn, but whether you were freeborn or descendant of slave, once you got here, you were going to be included in the general number and treated pretty much the same way. And so everything that Dr. Anderson just said, we're seeing is taking place right now. And one of the reasons why me, myself personally, do not recommend any black person vote blue, and this is not a political I'm not rallying for any political party, but I'm going to tell you what I do think, in my personal opinion, in terms of what party you definitely shouldn't rally behind, and that's definitely not for you, and that's the Democratic Party. The liberal left has never had the interest of the black populace at the forefront. It's only used the cause of the black populace to further its own agenda, which does not include you. And you can currently see that by who they're pushing ahead of you. And he just gave us the list of who that was. So anybody that's not you is going to be pushed ahead of you. And then anyone else who they deem as more valuable than you based on the social agenda that they have is also going to be pushed above you. And that includes those from the alphabet community. And so if you notice, one of the things that I've also noticed, and I'll say this, black masculinity is an endangered species. It's an endangered species. A masculine black man is not respected or honored in this country. He is seen as a threat because masculine black men are on the front line of protection for the black community and the black family. And if you can effeminize black men, incarcerate them, murder them, and do these things without consequence, what happens is it creates an imbalance in the black community overall, and it leaves black women and children vulnerable. It leaves black women vulnerable to now having to take on extra pressure to maintain the community and the family. The whole idea of I don't need a man is not a black community concept. You can't even look back as far as you want to in history and find any black community on the face of this planet that has ever espoused that. That is a creation of white feminism. And here's one of the interesting things that I found very interesting is that white feminists abandon black women whenever it comes down to a political, economic, or social issue, and they always side with white men. They recruit black women to support their cause. And then they abandon you at the point where they've gotten out of you what they came to get from you, which was your support and your vote. Black women by far out vote black men in terms of being involved in the political process. And so most politicians and even preachers, because in most of your churches, that's the majority of who's going to churches. That's why certain conventions and conferences and convocations and all these various names and things they have, camp meetings and all this other stuff, the majority of them are geared toward the women. And it's in vogue to belittle, dehumanize, and put down and insult men. But if you do that to a woman, then you'll be ridiculed, you'll be censored, and you'll be removed or canceled as they're doing now. All right, and this is what you'll see. And so black masculinity is at an all-time threat, and black men are also in the midst of what's possibly one of our greatest recovery efforts in terms of black men making a strong comeback, getting established in business, getting educated, being in their children's lives and things of this sort. But we still got a long way to go and a lot to fix. Black on black crime, the violence. I mean, most crime is intraracial, which means that most people commit crime against people that look like them and who they live around. So it's not some extraordinary phenomenon. White on white crime is high as well, if not higher than black on black crime. But based on percentages, ours is often focused on because we're a much smaller group. So it has a greater damage on us when we commit crime against ourselves or against one another. and you factor that in with the abortion rate and then the disproportionate rate in which we're incarcerated and other things like this, and you start to see this systematic dismantling of the Black family. Understand that the first institution that the Most High created when he made man and woman was the family. The family is the backbone of society. And wherever you can go into another people and you can dismantle the foundations of their society or the building blocks that would make them strong, you can almost enslave that people forever. If not physically, you can do it mentally. And in saying so, you would also do it spiritually, because you would begin to introduce them to ideas and ideology which are foreign to them, and they would adopt those things and take those things on as if they're their own. And so you would begin to see the effects over time. And now we've had about 400 years of history in the Western Hemisphere, in particular in the United States. And actually, it's a total of over 500 years of history in the Western Hemisphere, where we've seen this system at work. From North America to Central America to the Caribbean, or Caribbean, all the way down to South America, and even with a lot of our relatives across the pond in Europe. We see what happens. You look at the turmoil that Africa is in right now in many of the nations. Of the 54 nations on the African continent, none of them are in a position to actually resist, to actively resist against any European or Eurocentric incursion into their economy or anything. They don't have the military might to do so. And one of the keynote things that allows people to expand, especially in their independence, is the ability to defend their independence. And not one of those 54 nations in Africa has that ability to do so. And not one predominantly Black nation in the Western Hemisphere has the ability to do so. As a people group in the America, we've been extremely marginalized, and it's been systematically done to keep us always discombobulated and going in circles, but never making any progress forward. And so at some point, we got to recognize these things and approach it with practical solutions. We got to approach it with practical solutions. And one of the things that's used against us is that we are a very spiritual people. And so when we encounter a lot of these issues, we can have a tendency to over spiritualize it. And then I would not say that a lot of the issues that we're facing aren't spiritual. But I would say this also: in the comprehensive plan of Satan, who is the true enemy of all humanity, not just the Black people, but the true enemy of all humanity, racism is perhaps one of his greatest weapons to keep people divided and to keep people in a constant state of hate. So on that level, this battle is very spiritual, but it has ramifications or detrimental effects in the natural world. And we see those effects on us both socially, politically, and economically. It's a three-pronged attack. If you can afflict people socially, you can keep them divided. So you promote the ideas of feminism, and you have women separating themselves from their men. And you introduce an unbalanced standard into a community that you don't hold other communities to. The Black community is the only community in which the man not being in the home in order for the woman to get government assistance has been enforced in large measure. And I'm talking about what I've seen with my own eyes. I've seen white people on welfare, no removal of the man. I've seen Asians, I've seen Hispanics. I'm living in a neighborhood where there are many of them who are receiving government assistance, and they do not have to remove from their homes their current family structures. In fact, they're encouraged to bring more of their family members. But I can't find one Black household in which that's encouraged. You would lose your benefits. Even in the way that they bring immigrants here. The way that a lot of the Black immigrants would come here from other countries is quite tedious in comparison to others. How many Black immigrants do you know coming from foreign countries that in comparison to others, especially like now at our southern border with our Hispanics that's coming in, can claim asylum and say that they're running from an oppressive government and they're claiming asylum? It's very few that are allowed to do that in comparison to others. Our numbers have been controlled. We've been 13% of the population, if you check this out, for probably 200 years or so. So that means our numbers are being managed. Yet everyone else's percentage of the population has been increasing. It's projected that by the year 2025, the Asian population will have passed Blacks up. You know what that will do? That will knock us down out of our current position of number 3 as an ethnic group to number 4. The further down on the ladder you are and the less empowered you are economically and politically, the less your voice is heard, because other people now begin to become the priority. And then on top of that, a group that's not even a true ethnic group, but a manufactured group is also being introduced into the mix. And that's with your alphabet community. And they're being treated almost as a separate group. And what happens with all these little groups like this, because you do have Black people in that community, they're being forced to make a decision to choose between their ethnicity or their sexuality. And many of them are selling out and going the opposite way in terms of favoring their sexuality because they see the favored status that they're given from politicians. And this is a serious problem. I'm going to show it. Let me see here. We got another video here. Because a lot of people like to always bring up MLK. A lot of people like to bring up Dr. Martin Luther King. And you notice they love to celebrate him around the time of his birthday and around the time of Black History Month and things like this. And we always are reminded about the great speech that he gave, I Have a Dream. But one of the things they never show you is, what did Dr. King think after he gave that speech years down the road? What did Dr. King say? I'm gonna show you the speech that they almost never show you in terms of what Dr. King said about his own speech and how he now saw what was once his dream. Let's hear from the man himself. Let me see. Can you all hear that? Let me see. I can't hear it. Let me stop this for a moment.
I'm asking.
Okay. Looks like the sound came in a little bit later.
I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare. Now, I'm not one to lose.
Now, hold on. What did Dr. King just say? Do we need to rewind that? Listen to it again.
I must confess that that dream that I had that day has at many points turned into a nightmare.
Now, you heard it for yourself. What happened from the I Have a Dream speech to this interview in 1967? What happened? as someone once said, they didn't kill Dr. King because he had a dream. They killed him because he woke up. And his message changed so dramatically that people couldn't stomach it. So somewhere between when he gave that speech on August 28th of 1963 to this interview on May 8th, 1967, within less than 4 years' time, something changed. Let's listen to him.
Now, I'm not one to lose hope. I keep on hoping. I still have faith in the future. But I've had to analyze many things over the last few years, and I would say over the last few months. I've gone through a lot of soul-searching and agonizing moments, and I've come to see that we have many more difficult days ahead, and some of the old optimism was a little superficial, and now it must be tempered with a solid realism. And I think the realistic fact is that we still have a long, long way to go, and that we are involved in a war on Asian soil, which, if not checked and stopped, can poison the very soul of our nation. I'm not going to say that all of our problems will be solved if the war in Vietnam is ended, but I do say that the war makes it infinitely more difficult to deal with these problems. When a nation becomes obsessed with the guns of war, it loses its social perspective, and programs of social uplift suffer. This is just a fact of history, so that we do face many more difficulties as a result of the war. It's much more difficult to really arouse a conscience during a time of war. There is something about a war like this that makes people insensitive. It dulls the conscience. It strengthens the forces of reaction, and it brings into being bitterness and hatred and violence. I think the biggest problem now is that we got our gains over the last 12 years at bargain rate, so to speak. It didn't cost the nation anything. In fact, it helped the economic side of the nation to integrate lunch counters and public accommodations. It didn't cost the nation anything to get the right to vote established. And now we are confronting issues that cannot be solved without costing the nation billions of dollars. Now, I think this is where we're getting our greatest resistance. They may put it on many other things, but we can't get rid of slums and poverty without it costing the nation something. I feel that nonviolence is really the only way that we can follow, because violence is just so self-defeating. A riot ends up creating many more problems for the Negro community than it solves. You can, through violence, burn down a building, but you can't establish justice. You can murder a murderer, but you can't murder through violence. You can murder a hater, but you can't murder hate. And what we are trying to get rid of is hate and injustice and all of these other things that continue the long night of man's inhumanity to man.
Now let's take a look at the speech that probably is the one that actually got him killed. Because as you saw and here's one of the saddest things about the end of Dr. King's life that a lot of the time, especially amongst us, is not talked about. And that was the fact that he was more unpopular at the end of his life than he was during the early part of the civil rights struggle. And that was because Dr. King started to move towards Black empowerment, towards Black people getting not what was superficial gains, but was actually getting actual gains. Because through integration, we got duped out of our power. There were a lot of successful businesses before integration, and there were also stronger Black families before integration. But with integration, we lost almost everything that we had built up over a long period of time. Look at all the things that we had survived, such as Black Wall Street being burned down, and all of the various race riots that we had gone through. We had shown our resiliency, having gone through over 200 plus years of slavery, and then even going through another 100 years of Jim Crow. And yet, once we got the opportunity to integrate, we end up integrating right out of our power base. All right. And what we really needed was desegregation for equal access and equal opportunity. But the lie that we were deceived by was integration, because we thought that being able to join someone else's stuff was what was going to help us. And what happened was, all it did was cause us to give up stuff that we already had and that we needed. We're the only community, again, that has given up our economic base, and then also because of the lack of education and other things, and even internal turmoil amongst us, which has been stirred up by infiltration, again, and again, I'm gonna say this, the lack of education amongst us, we allowed a lot of things. Now, I know a lot of times, like I said, and I see what Ophesia said, the COINTELPRO. COINTELPRO was a big part of tearing down a lot of Black movements that had sprung up during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Now, without a doubt, we can't ignore that. However, my father, who passed away in 1998, was one to join the Black Panthers in 1965. He was on the front row to see a lot of these things develop that we currently talk about. He was right there with Bobby Seale and Huey Newton and all those guys. He saw a lot of the schisms and divisions and things. And one of the things my father said to me as an eyewitness, he was there at the conference they had, even I think it was in 1970 or something, where they came up with the term or classification of African American. So he was there for a lot of these events that took place. And one of the things my dad said was COINTELPRO and a lot of these other infiltrations by the government would have never worked if we had a solidified amongst ourselves. And so I'm approaching some of this tonight. This is question and answer, because I was trying to open it up for any biblical questions anybody had. But as we were waiting, we just started discussing some of these things and putting it out there. But I want to approach this from this particular aspect. And it's going to take some hard thinking for some of us and some serious self-examination. If you've been living under a system or structure for as long as we have, and you've been fully aware of the obstacles and challenges that you're up against, and you haven't come up with a strategy to strengthen your own ranks or close your own ranks and strengthen your community, but we continue to infight one another and not solidify ourselves and allow other people to divide us, there comes a point in time when we can no longer blame the outside forces. We have to start taking some of this blame ourselves. And that's a hard pill for a lot of us to swallow. At some point, you got to recognize that if you keep messing with a snake and it keeps doing snake things, you got to stop blaming the snake. The snake gonna be a snake. A dog gonna be a dog. But you got to form a strategy or some type of defense or method to deal with that snake or deal with that dog when you come across it and encounter it. You can't keep complaining about the snake being a snake. You can't keep complaining about racists being racist. They racist. They're going to continue to be racist. And the racists know who they are. And you have other people who pose themselves as allies who may not be overtly racist, but if they're in any way complicit or along with what racists do, and they don't ever take a stand on your behalf to fight with you, but yet want to recruit you to always fight with them, That's something that we have to take a look at. And if we keep falling for that and we keep fighting for everyone else, the question then I have to ask is, when are we going to fight for ourselves? When are we going to fight for ourselves? And, you know, Kedrick, I see what you said, that Fred Hampton began to partner with racists where they found common ground. It wasn't so much that he was partnering with racists. My dad actually worked under Fred Hampton in the Panther organization in Illinois. He was actually partnering with other poor people who are also on the end of the spectrum where Black people were, in terms of those who were considered poor white trash, those in the Hispanic community, those who were considered outcasts even by their own communities. He was partnering with them to build a coalition. And they didn't like what he was doing because he did find common ground. The Black Panthers, you know, had partnered with the Brown Berets a long time ago. There was a time when the Black and Hispanic community actually came together to try to advance these causes that they had in common. But again, through some method of divide and division, divide and conquer, whatever you want to call it, from the government, you know, that somehow got destroyed. The Black Panther Party got destroyed. This current iteration of the Black Panther Party is not this original party. And they're not even effective in terms of helping Black people in the way that the original party was. You barely even hear anything about them. The Brown Berets still survived and continue to this day, but not as strong as they once were. And I don't think a lot of people know that. But, you know, Hampton was an important figure. He probably would have been a great leader for the time, but they saw what he was doing and they took him out. And so one of the tactics that was used against us was just outright murder. It was just outright murder. And the murder tactic was used to put us in a state of fear. It's no different than the same tactics that were used by slave masters when they would buck break a man, basically have a male slave who was considered strong and rebellious and had his own ideas and could possibly be a threat. They would just rape him and make all the other slaves watch as they emasculated and raped this man and robbed him of his manhood in front of sometimes his wife, his children, his mama, other men, and they would use those tactics to put them in fear so that other slaves wouldn't rise up. And that's the same tactic that was used on a lot of our leaders during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. We're just going to outright murder them, and that'll make the rest of them remember what we did here. And in a lot of ways, it worked, because instead of us fighting for one another against what seemed to be insurmountable odds, we turned on each other, and now we fighting each other even to this very day. All that marching, all those beatings, all those dogs being sicked on our people, all those lynchings they went through, all those water hoses being turned on them. Now we doing the work for the establishment on each other. And let me tell you something, anything that's been taken from you is not going to be achieved or won back to you easily. You're going to lose some people along the way. But at some point, we got exhausted and we gave up, even like we have done today. Even like we've done. Let me show this other video here of Dr. King. Because this is, like I was telling you all earlier, this is where I believe that this was the one that probably got him taken out more than anything else he has said. He was already losing popularity. We stopped supporting him once we started integrating and think we had gotten what we wanted.
Refused to give the Negro any land. Through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with. And this is the reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we're coming to get our check.
Now, you heard what he said, right? This is Dr. King, probably more radical than most people remember him. Because the image that you're constantly pumped and told is the image that you should remember is, I have a dream. I have a dream, from August 28th of 1963. The image they don't show you are the two images that we just saw here today, where he called his dream a nightmare. There's even another speech where he said he fears that he integrated us into a burning house. And once he realized the error or mistake that the civil rights movement had made, he began trying to make moves to get black people out of the ditch that had been dug, or that we rather had dug for ourselves. Because what it did was it made all that marching, all that singing, all that praying, it made almost all of that irrelevant, because we weren't getting anything out of it. And what happens is, whenever you leave your progress or advancement in the hands of the people that you're protesting against, you're not going to go very far at all. If the people that you're protesting against control what you can protest against, and then can also control what you get out of the protest, you're not winning anything. You're not winning anything. A revolution doesn't follow the rules of those against whom it's revolting. It breaks the rules because its goal is to establish new rules that are favorable to the ones who are in the revolt. And what we've always done in the past is we've played by everybody else's rules. And as a result, we got what we got. Now, here's something else I want to show. This is pretty funny, but there is a lot of truth being said by this comedian by the name of Bill Burr. And I like Bill Burr. He's one of my favorite comedians, actually. But Bill Burr said some hilarious yet truthful things, and he masked it in comedy. And a lot of people probably didn't like what he said, but everything he said, it was actually true. It was actually true. And this, I'm showing this in particular for the sisters. Because this right here, for a lot of folks that claim to be feminists, things of this sort, this should make you think just why feminism don't work for black women in particular in America, because you're not at the top of the agenda. So when I see black women say they're black feminists, well, what black cause are you fighting for? Because you're not gaining anything for black people or black women. You're gaining things for the people who recruited you. So let's take a look at this real quick. This is pretty funny. It's about 9 minutes.
Let's talk white women here, shall we? Let's talk white women. White women, you're amazing. Amazing your accomplishments over the last few years. I got to tell you, the way white women somehow hijacked the woke movement, generals around the world should be analyzing this. Just to refresh your memory, the woke movement was supposed to be about people of color not getting opportunities, the at-bats that they deserve, finally making that happen. And it was about that for about 8 seconds. And then somehow, white women swung their Gucci-booted feet over the fence of oppression and stuck themselves at the front of the line. I don't know how they did. I've never heard so much complaining in my life from white women. My name is so hard with my SUV and my heated seats. You have no idea what it's like to be me. Trash and white guys, the nerve. Where's the camera? The nerve of you white women. Listen, I don't want to speak ill of my bitches here, okay? I don't. But let's go back in history here, okay? You guys stood by us toxic white males through centuries of our crimes against humanity. You rolled around in the blood money, and occasionally when you wanted to sneak off and hook up with a black dude, if you got caught, you said it wasn't consensual. Yeah, that's what you did. That's what you did. So why don't you shut up, sit down next to me, and take your talking to. Thank you. So, I don't know what it is. I don't know what the fuck is going on. But I think white women started it. It's the worst.
Pardon the language, you all. But if you can get past that, you can hear what he's saying.
The fucking worst. That's all they do is bitch, moan, and complain. I had no idea how difficult it was to be a white woman in the United States of America. Evidently, it's really difficult. Yeah, they're always bitching. Do you have any idea what it's like to be me? Well, I imagine it would be slightly less awesome than my life. What happened to you today, sweetheart? Huh? Did they not chill your rosé? You know? Was the trolley not running down at the mall? What happened? No, it's unreal. I'm really fucking annoyed how white women have the fucking balls to throw my white privilege in my face. You know? Sort of separate themselves from these white males with their white male privilege. It's like, bitch, you're sitting in the jacuzzi with me. The fuck are you talking about? Yeah, but you're fucking whining. Look, right out of the gate, all right? If you live in some honey boo-boo lifestyle on the Appalachian Trail, you know, your uncle just banged you in the dirt, all right, I can listen to you. No, one of my fantasies is I want to drive by like a woman's rally and just say the most sexist shit I can think of, just to watch them lose their minds. And I'll just drive by real slow, like, yeah, why don't you get back in the kitchen where you belong? Just to look in the rearview mirror, watching them flipping out in the road.
Now, Bill Burr is cracking, but he's facking. Okay, as my late godfather, Dr. Jefferson, used to say. Because he ain't telling nothing but the truth. He ain't telling nothing but the truth, you know, but he's hiding it in comedy. And if you notice, a lot of times, comedians seem to be one of the few groups that tell the truth, even though they hide it in something comedic. But not one thing he said was false. You got to read between the lines of the joke he's telling. And it's funny that he would step up and say something like this, you know, but it's nothing but the truth. And this, again, it brings back this very thing I was talking about earlier. You got to be careful of who you join sides with and support. Because the end game for them is not to advance you, it's to advance them. They just need you for the numbers to ride along. And once they cross the finish line, they close the door on you before you get there. And so why am I saying all this? Again, because it's on my heart, and because Black folks, we got to wake up. We keep talking about we woke, and we awoke to so many different things. We've been telling each other to stay woke, and while we've been telling everybody to stay woke, we've been snoring loudly. Whether it be about who we are as a people in terms of our identity, or whether it be as to whether or not we're awoke to the kind of things that are being done against us. Now, without any doubt, just bringing it back to a theological perspective, we know that the evil in this world is not going to be fully corrected until the Mashiach returns. Until Christ establishes his kingdom, it's not going to be fully corrected. All right? But in the meantime, before that happens, I also would present this, or venture to say this. There are things that we can do that are within our power, and I believe that it's expected of us to do, to try and make life better for those of us who are currently here. And some of that's going to require that we stop standing on the sidelines and just praying for deliverance, but that we actively get involved with certain situations so that we can start affecting our community and changing lives. Our role as the people of the Most High is to be evangelistic. That means you got to be actively involved sometimes with your community. Sometimes you got to make yourself do what you don't want to do. And sometimes you got to make a decision to withdraw from other things. And one of those things that I do feel we're going to have to withdraw from is we're going to have to withdraw from any group or organization that does not support the advancement of our community and our people, and the achieving of equality of our people, and any group that denies us equal respect and access. Now, we can make YouTube platforms and monetize them, and I can show 1,000 videos like this, and I can make a whole lot of money just to manipulate you and move you emotionally. But that's not my goal, even though I believe that's been the goal of a lot of others. We got a lot of hope hustlers out here. Some of them are Israelites, some of them are Hoteps, some of them are Islamic, others of them are more New Age or atheistic or whatever the case may be. But we got a lot of hope hustlers that are oftentimes bringing up the problems in many cases. And you look at, again, going back to the political aspect, if you look at what's been offered to us from the liberal left, in particular the Democratic Party, they like to highlight the problem. What they never do is offer you solutions. And you got to listen to the solutions that they do offer, because most of the time the solutions that they offer are not going to put you in a better position. It's going to position the people that's offering it to you, in a better place, but not you. They're going to leverage your numbers to help their cause, and then they're going to leave you behind. And that's what we see happen every election without fail. You just heard him talk about how white women in particular hijack just about every last one of the black movements that have come across. The proof of that is, look at what happened with the civil rights movement. Do you know who the greatest beneficiaries are of all the civil rights legislation that's been passed in this country from the 60s all the way until now? It's white women. Even though they're part of the dominant society or the dominant majority, they also qualify as a minority based on their gender. And so they've been able to leverage that aspect in order to siphon off the gains that were made by black people, the gains that were paid in black blood. So they continue to advance their own group. All right? And Tracy, you're meddling now. But yeah, affirmative action has been leveraged against us. It was supposed to be for us. but now it's being leveraged against us. My daughter went to Hampton University, HBCU, historically black college university. If you all go on YouTube, Google, BitChute, or any of these other platforms, I want you to just look up, do a search, and start finding out how many now white kids who can't afford to go to more mainstream universities are now using affirmative action to get into HBCUs. And it will shock you. Colleges that were founded sometimes by slaves or slave masters so that their slaves could be educated, many times so their children who they had by slave women could be educated, and that were meant to help give black people access to education that was on par with other universities and things, but in a separate environment, are now losing that. They're now losing that. And so you look around, like I said, feminism is a scam, because when feminism was started, it never had black women in mind. It was started by white women and it was meant for white women. But they figured something out along the way. If we just leverage other women to be a part of our cause, we can probably get more done. And then it keeps you discombobulated. So as a result, if you look at what's happening in our country, look at the way families are being promoted, even in our media. I worked for Macy's also in their corporate office. One of the reasons I left Macy's was because of the fact that Macy's started a advertisement program that diminished the value of black men while promoting the advancement of black women within the company, because a lot of the black women had moved into positions like vice president positions, manager positions, and other things of this sort. And more black men were being forced either into retirement or moved out of the company altogether, or either not given the opportunity to advance. They started to reflect that in a lot of their advertising. And so you had these holiday advertisements that were going forth in which they would show different types of families. And when they would show the black man in a family, he had to be gay. They would not show a black man with a black woman and black children as a healthy presentation of the family. They would show a black woman, but not with a black man. And you see this in advertisement more and more and more and more and more, and it's sending us subliminal messages. And then you see all the various, and in a lot of ways, we didn't fail for the okie doke, because you see all the different YouTube platforms that's constantly highlighting all these schisms and divisions between black men and black women. And you see how the game is being played against us to keep us fighting against each other rather than figuring out ways to figure things out. And so when you get black women to buy into the feminism thing, they buy right out of the black family without realizing it. When you get black men to buy into anything else other than the black community or black family, then they do the same thing. And so rather than coming together, we end up going in opposite directions and we tear our communities apart. We come together and we still make babies, but we don't make families. We become mothers before wives. We become fathers before husbands. And it reminds me of the scripture where it says, all the foundations of the earth are out of course. And that's because we as a people are out of course. We march into the tune of somebody else's drum. We sing into somebody else's beat. And the whole time we're doing this, we're being destroyed without realizing it. And at this point, the slave master don't have to put you on the tree and whip you, because we'll put each other on the tree and beat each other for them. And that's one of the cruel aspects of racism. It's one of the cruel aspects of racism. I got another video I want to show. And this is called Racism is Profitable. You may have seen this. But there's this incentive to keep racism going. Let me see if I can pull this video up here.
Arrived in the United States to this very moment, wealthy elites have used the tools of theft, exclusion, and exploitation to expand their wealth and power to the detriment of Black, Latinx, Indigenous people, and marginalized people of color. It all boils down to this simple truth: racism is profitable.
The profitability of racism sparks a vicious cycle called the oppression economy. Elite institutions are motivated to suppress the economic vitality of people of color. That economic oppression in turn hinders our political power, and that political oppression kneecaps our ability to change the system. This cycle plays out in every aspect of the economy and is particularly apparent in mass incarceration. The criminalization of people of color is a multi-billion-dollar industry. In 2017 alone, mass incarceration cost $182 billion, trapping mostly low-income Black and Latinx people in a cycle of economic and political disenfranchisement.
If we follow the money, we find that some of America's largest banks, including Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and JP Morgan Chase, have all extended millions of dollars in credit lines to for-profit prison operators like Geo Group and Core Civic. The unregulated operations of prisons has increasingly mandated cheap service for maximum profit. For example, bail bonds companies, telecommunications, food, and commissary companies gouge both those who are incarcerated and their families.
The exploitation doesn't stop upon release from prison. The suppression of our economic vitality is just the beginning. Because of discrimination, formerly incarcerated people are unemployed at a rate of 27%, higher than the total U.S. unemployment rate during any historical period, including during this pandemic and the Great Depression. Fines and fees associated with the criminal justice system have placed $50 billion in debt on the shoulders of approximately 10 million people who have been through the system. To make matters worse, many states bar people convicted of felonies from receiving any government assistance. And that's just incarceration. Over the past 4 decades, the cost of policing in the U.S. has skyrocketed, almost tripling from $42.3 billion in 1977 to $114.5 billion in 2017. Of the 100 largest cities in America, the 9 police forces that kill people at the highest rate per population all take up over 30% of their city's budget, leaving paltry resources to invest in housing, education, and healthcare.
This deliberate economic oppression suppresses our political power, weakening our constitutional right to change the rules of a system that regulates whether or not profit can be derived from racism. In our current system, the wealthy elite use their purchased political power to manipulate the system for their own gain at the expense of people of color. Let's turn back to people who are incarcerated. In 48 states, those who are currently or formerly incarcerated face restrictions on their right to vote, yet inmates count as residents of where they are incarcerated rather than their hometowns. That means people in prison have no representation and are used as pawns to skew representational power towards the largely white rural areas that house those prisons. That leaves incarcerated people's hometowns underrepresented.
The restrictions on voting power don't end upon release. 6.1 million people are prevented from casting a ballot due to a prior felony conviction. And over 4 times as many Black people have lost their right to vote due to felony disenfranchisement than non-Black people.
It's a never-ending cycle that has been churning for centuries. The profitability of racism motivates elite institutions to continue economic oppression that in turn hinders our political power. And that political oppression kneecaps our ability to change the system in which racism is so profitable.
So how do we break the cycle? Let's start with supporting candidates and pressuring elected officials at every level of government who will support bold policies that dismantle the oppression economy and build a liberation economy, and remove those that don't. To end the oppression economy, our government must end the criminalization of people of color, end our political suppression, and curb runaway corporate power.
And to build a liberation economy, our government must guarantee that all people of color have access to basic economic rights, like a guaranteed income and employment, universal health care, guaranteed housing, a free college education, and generational wealth. This liberation economy is within our power to create. As Teddy Roosevelt said, we are the government. It does not belong to the corporations and the plutocrats that currently control them. It belongs to us, and it is within our power to take it back.
We can break this cycle if we act together.
Let's get to work.
All right, so we heard what they had to say. What do y'all think? What do you all think? Yeah, Kendrick, definitely. Definitely. Malcolm X said that. He said that the most dangerous person to the Black community is the white liberal. And that's because they pose as your friend when they don't have any intentions on helping you accomplish any of your goals. But they present themselves as being for you when the truth is they're against you. Again, this is leveraging our numbers in order to further their agenda. And so once they get out of you what they want, then they abandon you. And this is going to happen again this November. You know, with the election being about a month away, I have no doubt that that's going to be more of what happens. Now, we are at a point in time where more and more Black people are starting to wake up in this country and realize what's going on, and they're starting to change their views and opinions about who to support politically. And I would say this, I wouldn't put my support with any particular party. Put your support with policies. Who got the policies that we can support that's going to make it better for us while we're here? Now, I know, like, again, a lot of us, I know we very spiritual people, and that gets used against us. Because at the same time, while we're very spiritual, we also tend to say a lot of things like, well, ain't no use in voting, or ain't no use in getting involved politically. If you don't want to vote, that's your choice. We fought for the right to vote, not for the mandate to have to vote. But you should look to get involved in other areas in your community where you can plug in to force the changes that we need to see. Because none of this stuff is going to change until the Lord comes back, and when it's going to change for good. But there are some changes that can be made until then. Because the world is still going to hell in the handbasket fast as it can get there, it seems. And things around us, we see with the economy, all this inflation that's currently going on, all the money that's been constantly given to foreign governments like Ukraine and not to the people here. You notice how this government play games with us. We don't have money to give you reparations. But as soon as this, pandemic broke out, they were giving the money away like it was nothing. When a war happens in another country, like between Russia and Ukraine, they sending money away constantly. And that's not their money. Those politicians aren't giving away their money. They're giving away your money. Yeah, that's pretty interesting stuff. It's very interesting how that's done. And so is a game being played with us or against us. And yeah, Tracy, that's a pretty interesting stat, huh? They count as population where they are incarcerated. And that definitely has a lot to do with the battle over a lot of these facilities. And so we see in all of these different things that are going on. And it's going to be up to us as to whether or not we're going to force these folks to be accountable, and whether or not we're going to actually put our money where our mouth is so that we can gain some form of power or empowerment. I'm not with the idea to just give up and just wait for all this stuff to happen. You're going to be waiting for a long time, and we don't know how long we have before the Lord come back, but we're going to put our children, our grandchildren, and our other offspring that's coming after us in a worse position if we don't take the reins of our destiny right now and ask the Most High to help us with the time we have left. And let me say this too, because a lot of times, like I said, we say a lot of things. We say a lot of things that don't drive us towards solutions, but it actually drives us more towards being excluded from the solution process. Like we say, well, you persons are not elected, but they selected. Well, I'll say this, perhaps. But if your voice didn't count, then there wouldn't be suppression. They wouldn't try to stop your voice or your vote if they didn't think it mattered. But I'll say this, don't vote for nobody you don't believe in, and don't vote for nothing you don't believe in. And sometimes a not voting is a form of protest, because you're letting both people know you're not worth my vote. And since I don't have a better choice, I'm not going to make a choice at all. You can't force people to do that either. And you're going to be pressured because folks going to get mad. Then people don't win and say it's all your fault. If you notice something, when Democrats lose, guess who the first group of people is they blame? They blame black folks. But when they win, guess who's the first people they dismiss? Black folks. They blame you if they lose. And when they win, they ignore you. They ghost you. They ghost you. And they do an even more sinister thing, because they fine-tune the blame of black folks down to separating black men and women and saying it's the black men's fault because they didn't vote more, they didn't support more. They're trying to do this right now with this governor race in Georgia. And they say, well, if black men vote for Stacey Abrams, she'll win. Well, why should she win? Just because she's black? She don't have anything for us. So the question should be, why should black men vote for Stacey Abrams? And then somebody will say, well, are you just going to vote for Kemp and sell out? You can sell out voting for black people too, because the black person you voting for may be a sellout. So you don't just vote for somebody because of how they look. That's how you get took. They got to bring something to you, and then you got to hold their feet to the fire about what they bringing to you. In fact, you don't let them just bring it to you. You take it to them. This is sort of a passion of mine, because I want us to start thinking about our present time here. You know, because I would hear folks always get into this uproar about Obama. Oh, Obama didn't do this for us. Obama didn't do that for us. Now, I was not an Obama fan. But here's what I told black folks, and I'm going to say it again. Obama didn't work for black folks because black folks didn't put him to work. The gay folks put him to work. The immigrant communities put him to work. Everybody put Obama to work and gave him an agenda except us. All we wanted from the Obamas was photo ops. Ooh, ain't he a good-looking president? Ooh, look at Michelle, ain't she fine? Ooh, look at them beautiful children. So folks start putting Obama as their profile pic. Folks start showing all their pictures of them in love. We just wanted photo ops. We didn't want results. We thought Obama was supposed to hook us up. He was the hooker brother up president. That's how we do politics. If we elect you, black man, you better do something for us, black person. Do what? Politicians have to be sent to government with an agenda from the people who elected them. They're not, goodness gracious. They're not going to just go to DC or the state capitol or wherever they're going and just do what they read your mind and do what you want done. We have to form a coalition, and we got to start holding these folks accountable by giving them an agenda. When I was in the military, they said anything that's not written down or documented didn't happen. So you can't demand of people to do something for you, and you ain't even told them what you want done. All we told Obama to do was be black and good looking, and that's what he did for us for 8 years. Why did the Asian hate bill go through so quick? Because them Asian folks leveraged their money and their economic power, and they forced those politicians to pass that thing through like yesterday. Why did the Jewish hate bill go through so fast? Because they did the same thing. Now, black folks say we want to stop black hate bill because of how long we've been mistreated. And I feel you on that because I agree with that. But what agenda have we given our politicians? Whose feet have we held to the fire? Who have we demanded, if you don't do what we said, the next election come, you will not be in office because we're going to vote you out. We don't do that. Instead, we choose to remain inactive, uneducated on the process, and uninvolved, and we hurt ourselves. And so what I'm saying to us as a community, and this wasn't even how this was supposed to go tonight, but since we're here, we're here. To change our present circumstance and try to create some semblance of a better future, we're going to have to start thinking differently. We're going to have to be strategic. We're going to have to start not only reading the Bible and trusting the Lord to deliver us, but we're going to have to also respect the scriptures that talk about us basically, and I'm paraphrasing, using what he's already given us. We want divine intervention in everything. And the Lord say, but I've given you power to tread on scorpions and serpents and over all the power of the enemy. But do we believe that? When Moses cried to him at the Red Sea, when Pharaoh was on the children of Israel's heels, he said, why are you crying to me? Use what I gave you. He told him, lift up the rod and stretch it out. You got to do something you're not used to doing. You may have to step out of your comfort zone. You may have to find out what's happening. We want police to stop harassing and beating and shooting and killing our people. You're going to have to do something in your local community to shift the balance of power to where now you can tell the police what to do. Because you're the one who provides the tax money that pays their salaries. We're the one who elect those mayors and commissioners and city council members and those police chiefs and different ones. But if you don't have the power because we won't educate ourselves on the process, then we're going to fall victim every time to the people that do. And Ophesia, that's not a bad thing to do. You know, Kendrick, you're right. You have to make them do it. Marching along changes nothing. You have to harass these folks. Exactly. Call your local congressman, email them, you know, snail mail them, you know, bother them. You got to be like the widow that went to the unjust judge. There's a powerful principle in that that's practical and not just spiritual. And if you only vote in local elections, I have absolutely no problem in that. In fact, your local elections have a greater impact on you than the federal elections, because that has to do with right where you live. But the reason why your state and federal elections are important is because it has a lot to do with some of the very things we talked about here on tonight, or we saw in the presentations, with the incarceration rate and other kinds of policies and things of this sort. Man, Ernest, you hit it right on the nail. We need lobbyists. And so my goal as a teacher and a preacher is trying to educate our people, not just on scripture, but on other things, because I believe salvation is a total work. It ain't just about pie in the sky after we die, but it's about getting a few slices while we're still here on earth. Yeshua said, in this life, you will receive 100-fold. He ain't saying that after you get to Beulah land. He talking about right here, right now. So there's still some things that we can do to affect the way that we're treated and seen. Every brother don't have to get a passport and go overseas to get a wife. Every woman black woman don't have to divest and try to go to another community to get a husband. Every black community don't have to turn into a ghetto. We can take some of the hoods back and turn them back into neighborhoods, but it's whether or not we're willing to put in the work. Is whether or not we're willing to put in the work. So this kind of a little bit of a different message on tonight. And I know it's going to be, anybody listening to this, will be probably plenty of people have different opinions and things of this sort. But black folks, that old saying that says, if it must be, then it's up to me, that holds a lot of truth to it. That holds a lot of truth to it, because a lot of the changes that can still be made is up to us as to whether or not we want to make those changes or affect those changes. And the Lord is looking at us, and we're going to be judged on not only how we've treated our environment in terms of this earth, but how we've also treated one another in the political landscape, in the social landscape. What have we done economically to help better our communities and to benefit humanity? All that stuff comes into play. You can't just unplug and be uninvolved, because, you know, there's the sin of commission based on things that you do. There's also sins of omission, things that you should do that you don't do. And we'll be judged for both. So I'm not urging you to register with any political party. I'm not even telling you you have to vote. But what I'm telling you is you need to be involved in the process that brings change to your community if you want to see an improvement in our communities and in the lives of our people overall. You can't just be waiting on some exodus or some rapture or any of these other things, whatever your belief is. We got to occupy till he comes. So that means that we got to do something while we're here right now, because what we're doing here right now is what we're going to be judged on. So we have to increase our education on these things. We have to get involved. We have to get involved, you know, and I'm all for that, Brother Ernest. Yeah, we got to take these gangsters, you know, and turn them into warriors. We got to get rid of the gangster so he stop going to jail and he can go home and be a husband and a father. We got gangster girls too, you know. These sisters got to stop twerking and start working on building up their families. And these brothers got to stop making it rain at the strip club and make it rain in your community. You got all that money to waste so you can see somebody get naked, but you can't spend none of it and reinvest it in the businesses and the people and in the children. Man, you some kind of fool. So that's my spiel for tonight. It's about 2 hours that I've been talking and running my mouth, and hopefully this was beneficial to some people. It's supposed to be Q&A, but nobody really had any questions. So I say, just let me present some information, and we just have kind of like, I guess, a little family, you know, sharing session. So it's almost like show and tell to an extent. But that's what we have for this evening, beloved. And so I'm not going to belabor the time, but I'm going to go ahead and we're going to bring this to a close. As always, you know, we're not always right and others aren't always wrong, you know. So we want to always be trying to find the right way to do things. All right. Yeshua said to us in St. John chapter 5, verse 39, to search the scriptures, for in them you think you have eternal life, and they are they which testify of me. And listen, the scriptures have an answer for every question, a solution to every problem. It's a roadmap to heaven, but it's also a guidebook for life. And we got to start using it and putting it to practical use. All right. Acts chapter 17, verse number 11 says, now these Jews were more noble than those in Thessalonica. They received the word with all eagerness, examining the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. Amen. And we want to examine the scriptures always so that we know what we ought to do. Amen. So with all that being said, beloved, I pray nothing but the best for the blessed. And truly you are the blessed of the Most High and the apple of his eye. Sister Alicia, she said she have a question, but she said, but my dumb phone. Well, sister, you're supposed to have a smartphone. It's the new age. we gonna raise money to get Sister Talisha a jitterbug. All right. That's one of them old school flip phones with the big buttons on it. All right. I'm probably gonna end up needing one of those myself. But in any event, thank you, Ophizi. You know, if you haven't already, please go ahead and hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and hit subscribe. And we will be back this week to do some more Bible-oriented lessons. But I don't think this wasn't necessarily Bible-oriented. Like I said, I talk about a lot of different things on this platform. You just mostly used to hearing me teach directly from the scriptures. But we did share a couple of scriptures, but we have some principles that I think we ought to put in place. Okay. Israel, wherever they were scattered to and wherever they went to, they did get involved with the politics of those countries or those nations in order to make a better life for their people while they were there. All right. So, you know, we got to learn how to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, wherever it is we are. All right. So with that said, beloved, I love you with the love of the Most High. All right. And like I said, you are the apple of his eye. And there's nothing no devil in hell can do about it to stop you. So until the next time, shalom.